Dr. Hirado, can you please begin your presentation? By the way, if for those of you that have joined recently, I apologize for zooming in. I was diagnosed with COVID yesterday, so I'm trying to keep everybody healthy. Dr. Hirado, if you can begin your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair Geller, and I'm trusting that they're adequate mic. So the presentation being shared today is a little bit of an update on the topic of the Central and Southern Flood Risk Study. That is an effort that the region has lobbied and advocated for I would say nearly a decade. So there's been a lot of work and history in terms of how we've arrived at the state that we are today with regards to the status of the study, and some recent conversations that may influence forthcoming actions by our counties and in collaboration with the Water Management District to help move this project along. A couple of terminologies, statements here that Isabel helped with. One, the FPLOS is the Flood Protection Level of Service Studies. These are studies that are undertaken by the South Florida Water Management District that are focused on individual basins, looking at future flood risk and water management needs to address that flood risk within these basin-specific studies. Coastal structures, these are the gates or the control structures on the primary canals that run west and east throughout our counties that provide drainage and flood protection. The coastal structures separate fresh water from saline water on the downstream and upstream sides of each of these structures. The phase 1 and phase 2 studies for this FPLOS. Phase 1 are analyses of these control structure projects that have not been funded by the district but are slated. And the phase 2 studies have received some portion of funding. So this is all relevant because these FPLOS studies have provided technical contributions to the larger joint study, which is the CNSF project, which was on that title slide. This is relevant because the Army Corps of Engineers constructed this whole system, but the Water Management District provides operations and maintenance. And so we have two entities that have a historical responsibility for the construction and operation of the system. That's all relevant because this system began its design back in the 1940s. It was constructed. It didn't contemplate the changes in landscape that we have today with regards to development, population, flood control needs. But most important in our conversation has been that of climate change, sea level rise, and the impacts of increased rainfall on the management and operations of this whole system. So recognizing the weaknesses in the system to meet the regional flood protection that we all depend on, we had advocated for some time for the Army Corps of Engineers to undertake a study, a resilience study, an update of this program, of this project. We were successful in gaining authorization for the study, subsequently appropriations, and this study was called the 216 study. That's because it's the authority under which the study was undertaken. I don't want to belabor too deeply, but the 216 study had a limitation of a constrained budget of $3 million. And we always knew that that wasn't going to be enough, but it was enough to get started. And we knew that we would go through this scoping process where we would figure out the real budget that was needed. And we would be coming back and we'd be asking for a waiver or basically an approval of this modified scope in order to do the work that was actually needed, because $3 million was not sufficient. So the Water Management District and the Army Corps of Engineers are the leads. The Water Management District is the local sponsor. Their team, which includes the most significantly Dr. Moran and Tim Geisen as the project leads, have been responsible and with a lot of stakeholder support, went through a scoping process. And ultimately the determination was, look, when we look at these structures and there's we can say between 18 and 20 structures in our region on these gates, the control structures. When we look at those and we think about what needs to happen in terms of the resilience analysis and improvements, we expect this study budget would be about $19 million. Well, that recommendation was taken forward, and the Corps, the Army Corps, has what they call a vertical team responsible for saying, okay, we've looked at this study and we're ready to, advance your recommendation. But that's not what they said. They said, the $19 million scope is too big. You need to go home, do some homework, reduce it down to something more manageable in terms of budget. And the Corps and the district worked on that and came back and said, okay, we have a modified budget or a study that will only focus on those structures. It's not going to look at all the canal needs. It's not going to look at all the banks. We recognize there's these other things that the system needs, but if we just focus on what needs to happen with these structures in order to maintain operations of these canals, we estimate a budget of $11.3 million, and that was submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers for approval in about July of 23. Next slide, please. So it was sitting up there, waiting for approval, and we were very much aware that the need was to have this sign off by September of 23. And so we were pestering about the status of the sign off, which wasn't occurring. And in the course of that, we learned that there's a new need to be addressed as part of this scope. And we have this study budget in front of us and scope and so forth, but now you need to go back and incorporate this requirement that was flagged for us, which is this 20% engineering design, which they call level 3. I believe the study would otherwise look at level 4. Level 3 is a big deal because while it's only considered 20% of project design, it's actually the bulk of the cost for project design. So it's really kind of front loaded with this 20%. As you get to 80%, very little more needs to be done. So this had major consequences because in order to get to 20% design, it has major cost implications. And so the Corps began looking at what it would take to take all of these structures to level 3 design and said, look, you're looking at a budget of about $40 million now. And we already know that the 19 million wasn't supported. So you're looking now at a budget of 40 million. And while you were previously seeking WRDA authorization in 26, which would be the approvals to take those projects to construction, whatever comes from this 216 study, they said, if we do this level of engineering across all these structures, you're looking at 2032 for completing a study. This is critical because we know our system's failing already. We already know that there's times when the gates can't open, we can't drain. Corps has acknowledged that it's, not operating where it needs to be. The districts recognize that for more than a decade. So this delay on just getting the study done, not even minding authorization and appropriations and construction, is a problem. And so in conjunction with recognizing this $40 million alternative, which probably wasn't going to have much traction, the Corps and district also began coming up with yet another alternative. And that other alternative is what we will call a hybrid study. And this hybrid study says, well, we know we can't get approval for the 40 million, or not likely, and we know that the Corps is going to require something on the engineering design. What if we now analyze 4 of the salinity control structures to that level 3, and then based upon the findings of those, we should have enough information to get some pretty good cost estimates on the remaining structures, and with that we could advance, something that the Corps could comfortably sign off on and move forward. It's anticipated that this revised approach would have a budget of 19.2 million, could reach WRDA authorization in 2028. And so we have these 3 alternatives. 11.3, which doesn't meet the engineering requirements, 40 million, which meets all the engineering requirements, but has a big budget and a long time delay, and a hybrid at 19.2 million with 4 salinity control structures addressed. But then the question comes, well, what about the remaining salinity control structures? When will we get to final design on that? And so the counties were concerned about the uncertainty and were saying, pushing really hard for just kind of waiving the engineering requirement. But doesn't look like that's going to be the alternative that moves forward. So where does that put us? Next slide, please. So we initiated conversations with the Corps and the district, and let me just say that the most recent conversations with the Corps were just January 8th. And this proposal was developed at the staff level on January 10th. So this is all very critical, and the reason the timing is critical is because the Corps will be running out of money to do any additional work on this project in March. And what we desperately need is the Corps to sign off on a scope that allows us to move forward. And our question is, how can we get comfortable with a scope that will fit the needs of the region? And so we reached into this conversation with the district and said, what could we do if we were to work more directly with the South Florida Water Management District, find some gap funding to address these other structures that the Corps is unable to take up because of the constraints we just went through? And the district said, well, we could work with you to address these structures and accelerate these engineering studies, and ideally move this local product in path with what the Corps is working, so that we could reach that authorization in the time frame that is desired. But we have these FPLOS studies that are underway that do some of this work for us. Some of them are in phase 1, 7 structures. There are 13 structures located in Miami-Dade. Let's go to the next slide, please. And what's proposed at this point is the following. We can work with the Army or with the Water Management District, who's able to complete the engineering requirements on these structures at a cost of about 1.5 million. This is compared to the Corps that estimates work at 2.5 million. You know, everything costs more when we work with the Corps. So working with the district, we can manage the costs more directly. We propose that the structures that are located in Broward County, we would address through support from our board. The structures that are located in Miami-Dade County, ideally, that county could take up that request for the remaining, gap need. And that would be potentially allocated based upon, Broward County has 7 structures in its area. Miami-Dade has 13 structures in its area. The Army Corps of Engineers would presumably be including 4 in its study, so 2 in each county. So then look at the difference. We would have then 5 structures located in Broward County, a total of 11 structures that would remain to be engineering costs met in Miami-Dade County. And at $1.5 million per structure, that would mean $7.5 million would need to come from Broward County in order to complete these engineering studies, $16.5 million from Miami-Dade in order to complete the engineering studies. The Water Management District has indicated that a 2-year time frame would be sufficient for doing that work. And if we were to move forward in this manner, there's a strong possibility of being able to complete all of the engineering work at the level 3, pair that with the Corps study, and move everything potentially in 2026 rather than the 2028 timeframe. That would be our goal, but at minimum meeting 2028 with all of the work and seeking authorization at that time for the completion and moving forward with construction. So the request today is for consideration by the Regional Planning Council, I think, for that conversation. And of course, the Water Management District and Corps are here to provide additional details that I was not able to cover or clarify.
Okey-dokey. Isabel, I have a number of questions. Is the plan to for presentations from the other people present, or is they're here to answer questions?
Just answer questions, comments, and I'm sure the Army Corps might like to add some information. We have Jim and Carolina also, so.
Okay, let me ask some questions. And Isabel, since I can't see the order that hands are going up in, can you please begin a queue for additional questions when I'm done?
Yes, Alicia's on
that. Dr. Hirado, and we discussed this recently at the Water Board, which I chair. My understanding is that the proposal that you are discussing involves, you said, only the salinity control, what was the wording you used? Structure. Does this include only the salinity control barriers, or does this also include the pumps?
Yeah, thank you for the question, sir. The study would focus on how do those structures, which are currently gravity-driven gates, how would they need to be upgraded? And the expectation is that every one of these gates would be equipped, it would be retrofit the structure, elevated, additional improvements to the structure itself, and then the addition of the pump. And all of these would be transitioned from gravity operated systems to pump controlled systems.
Thank you. And this question to you and to Major Bell and the other, let's see, Ms. Velez and Mr. I think
Geisen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't understand how this works. And the reason I don't understand it is because I do understand it, which means I don't understand how the proposal would actually work. If this doesn't, the problem that we have, and I've been running around screaming about this like a chicken with my head cut off for at least 5 years. And I have to say that sometimes Chicken Little is accurate. And the Army Corps did tell me 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was Colonel Kelly at the time, but it may have been the one before him, that said that if they got the authorizations, if they got all the money they needed, and if everything went well, their best scenario was that they could complete the project in 15 years. With that many caveats, I'm assuming 20 is a realistic time frame, and your studies, Dr. Hirado, have shown that in approximately 12 years, the ocean level, sea level rise, ocean level, and inland water will be about even. Now, as those of us on the SFRPC will remember from the SEDS report, our excuse me, our climate in Broward is either tropical rainforest or tropical monsoon, meaning it rains a lot. And so under your numbers, and give or take 12 years, we won't be able to drain when it rains. And I think if we're looking at 2028, well, I'll get to that in a moment, for possible authorizations. 15 years from that is problematic. But water doesn't flow uphill, which is why we need the pumps. But if we're not either putting in seawalls or berms, I don't see how the water actually reaches the intratidal waterways, the intracoastal, or the ocean. If we're pumping water into the existing canals without adding either seawalls or berms, aren't we going to flood everything in sight on both sides of the canals?
Well, Senator Geller, the system is obviously more complex than just making additions to the salinity control gates. We recognize that there's a whole of improvements as you've described. It could be improving the cross sections of the canals for additional storage, additional conveyance, improvements to the secondary control system with additional pumps, improvements downstream in the way of management within the floodplain. The seawalls are, of course, a requirement under county ordinance with regards to improving their height, but there could be other bank improvements that are needed, and that's all anticipated. So the study itself will not only direct recommendations that are focused on the control structures, but we'll provide additional recommendations that will feed into a more comprehensive study that's already authorized, which is called the comprehensive study. And I think it's just appreciated that not everything will be happening overnight. We know that obviously we're seeing timelines extend beyond the accelerated track. The Water Management District is already working with Miami-Dade County on a number of incremental investments where partial improvements are provided that will be part of the larger fix. So not everything has to be constructed with a single project, but could happen incrementally as some of the pressures dictate phased and priority implementation. So I think the recognition is that, yes, a lot more will need to happen, but there are already failures that are with a number of structures that the Water Management District has already identified as currently not meeting service needs. So I think you see a stepwise process of improvements, working to bring other supportive projects to the pump component itself. And the district has examples where they've been working with FEMA funds to do just this. So your point's well made. I think there's more than one solution that needs to be part of the track that we're pursuing.
Dr. Arado, I recognize that some canals are in worse shape than others. My concern was just, I don't think without fixing the banks, that even in the worst case canals, putting in pumps without controlling the water inside the canals, without adding either berms or seawalls, accomplishes nothing other than severe flooding once you pump the water on the other side of the salinity control barrier. If there aren't berms or seawalls, you're simply flooding everything around that. But let me move on. Under the word of 28, we're hoping for authorization. You said authorization for what? Authorization for the whole project, authorization for a couple of them, authorization for things with the canals. What is it we're hoping for in the 2028 WARDA Act?
So let me just reiterate that the most pressing need that we would have is sign off on the scope of work by the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works at the Army Corps. We have to have that before we would even be in the position to talk about additional appropriations or the subsequent authorization. So what would happen with this study is once it is approved and moves forward, when it's completed, you have a chief's report that gets signed, which is basically the approval of the report. And then that moves forward for congressional authorization. And what that does is approve the recommendations for implementation. So since we're talking about how we would bring all these resources together in order to ensure a complete study and chief's report, it would include the expectation is that we would have all 20 structures with the engineering complete, included in the recommendations, and we would be seeking with the Corps positioning for authorization of all 20 of those control structure improvements and what they would include. And I would have to defer to the Corps and the district with regards to how the secondary recommendations would be treated, but presumably those would just move, they would flow into the comprehensive study that we would be undertaking in parallel.
Okay, and my last question, which is in two parts, is the Corps quoted me about 5 years ago that they thought that this would be somewhere, as I recall, around around $3 billion. But that was 5 years ago. That was only for the pumps, that did not include anything for the secondary canals, that did not improve anything for the rights of way for the seawalls or berms. I'm guessing, and this is just a wag, that would take it to somewhere around 10 billion now. So I'm hoping that the Corps can give us, I realize you don't have, exact numbers, but do you have a guess at the total cost for all 20 of the major canals plus the minor canals for the salinity control barriers, the pumps, and the associated berms or seawalls, number one, and number two, if it's in the $10 billion range, which is what I'm guessing, how likely is it, do you think, that we get added with all of the pressures? I mean, I have been advocating for years that people, it's a joke that people have heard me say many times, to buy arcs and houseboats, because I think we'll be needing them here. So can anybody from Major Bell, sorry, COVID, Major Bell, could you comment on the total, what you think the total cost is and how likely it is that that gets funded? And that's after which I will be, Isabel, if you have a list, can you text me the names in the order? The only one I have for the next question is Commissioner Furr. Major Bell, could you answer the question that I gave as well as any of the other questions I've asked? Major Bell? Or anybody from the Army Corps?
While he's getting on mute, good morning. I'm going to jump in while Major Bell's working on his audio. Good morning, Senator Geller. Good morning, members
Thank you. Thank you for
of the
being here
council,
today,
sir.
Ms.
Thank you.
We
Thank you,
appreciate
sir.
you being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you, Dr. Jurado, for the excellent presentation. So, sir, to answer your question first very directly, I will give you some numbers of what we are working with this year, the 2024. We are almost ready to award about 1,000 CFS pump station in the area for the Everglades program. And that one is anticipated to cost just the pump station and that kind of work about $200 million. So that's a good, very current estimate of a high flow, high capacity pump station in the region that helps us understand future estimated costs. And so we know there's more to each location where these salinity control structures exist, but that's a good current estimate of a pump station in the area.
5 years ago, we were told that they were about $100 billion each. So they should be
That's
more
right,
than that
sir.
now.
That's right, sir. So that helps me also, if I may, sir, can I offer some insight as to what the
Please.
Corps has been experiencing? Thank you, sir. And so that's a good segue to what the Corps of Engineers has been experiencing in cost growth across the nation. So our Chief of Engineers, General Spellman, is actually engaged in this discussion about this study. Colonel Booth and I were in DC in the last 2 weeks and spoke to him about the study, as well as General Graham, and as well as Mr. Connor, our ASA. So they're all aware of the importance of the study. And on a national perspective, the guidance they're giving us is that when they speak to congressional members and appropriators, the cost of civil works of these important infrastructure projects across the nation has grown significantly. And therefore, they were asking the Corps to provide better certainty of our costs. And that's why you see the new guidance that Dr. Jurado was describing.
On the 20% engineering.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's directly related to the growth we've seen in costs across the nation and our leadership trying to provide more refined, more advanced engineering design during the feasibility stage. But it's important to balance that with urgently addressing the nation's needs. And so that's what our leadership is working on. And this study actually is leading the nation and try to navigate that balance, sir.
My main question is, if it's 400 million, if it's 4 billion for just the pumps, 200 million times 20, I just want to know, I'm ballparking the total cost around 10 billion. Does that sound like a ballpark number, or do you think the ballpark is 7 or 15? Do you have a ballpark guesstimate?
So we're working on that, sir. I don't want to give you a number that
If the
then,
answer is no,
yeah,
I will
yeah,
accept it.
yeah, we're working on that.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to talk anymore because we have Commissioner Furr has a question, and we have to get to Mr. Murley in the next 15 or 20 minutes. So, Commissioner Furr, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you. This is, as Dr. Hirado mentioned, this has been going on for quite a while. I remember when I was mayor in 2018, we sent letters out trying to get the study done. And I felt for a long time that this is something that we should be, I mean, you can sit there and wait for the federal government to do this, or we do the study ourselves and get it done.
Yeah.
And I felt all along that this is not that big of an ask. Well, from the county's perspective, we have a $7 million budget, $7 billion budget. This would be one little part to working with South Florida Water Management District. I would hope that we could do matching funds. We pushed real hard this year to ask the South Florida Water Management District not to roll back their taxes, knowing that there's needs.
Yes.
And this is one of those needs. And this is one of those needs I think we should be asking as a regional planning council, combined with the Tragic Coast, because they're affected too, with Palm Beach, I think, a little bit. I don't really know much. But
We're in Miami-Dade primarily.
Yeah.
Of course, it all runs down there.
yeah, but between the two counties, this is should be right on the top of our list. And I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, but I know it is of a major concern. And if it's $7 million over 2 years, just to get it going, there's a way to find that. There's a way to do that. And I know I know, Jim, it would be more on Miami-Dade side, but your budget's a lot bigger than ours. So, I mean, this may be one of those times where we just collaborate, get the study done, and then tell the feds, we got it. Here's exactly what you need. Let's do it. Let's do it now. We don't have to wait. I'm tired of waiting on it. I'm tired of hearing. I mean, I've heard about these arcs for too long. So.
Arcs and houseboats.
Yes, exactly.
To go get it.
And so I think it's incumbent upon us to do, this is not that big to do the study. And it shows we have some skin in the game. And when we do that, we've done our part, Army Corps, we've done our part here. We need your help now. And then let's go for it. So my recommendation is that this planning council, make a motion or decide to encourage both counties to do those matching funds. I would ask the South Florida Water Management District, Caroline, I don't know how to do this, but maybe you can figure out a way to do this. But if there's a way of doing matching funds, I think it'd be great. I think it shows good faith effort on everybody's part. And that's the way I'd like to go and start tomorrow. I mean, that's how urgent it is. I don't think we have any time to waste.
No.
I've seen the timelines. I've seen that sea level rise curve. And the sooner the better. And get it ready for this next, either budget, or we do, half in the middle of the year, we do.
Supplemental.
Yeah, and we just do it there and get it going. That's what I would like to see happen. And I don't see any reason why not to. And I'd love to hear from both Jim and Carolina what your thoughts are on trying to do that. And all of us working together and putting together a product that tells the feds this is urgent. I can't imagine, given what's at stake. And the 10 million people that live in this area that are going to be dependent on this working, how this doesn't rise to one of the top urgent projects in the United States. I mean, I don't know how it's not. Because if you have that kind of a flood, if you know, then you're talking about real catastrophe. And I think that, I think that the Corps recognizes that, but they just, they have their processes that they have to go through. They have to get their study. So let's give it to them and give it to them quick. That's my thoughts.
Commissioner Furr, well said. As one Broward County Commissioner, since this is not a violation of sunshine, since this is a publicly noticed meeting, I agree with everything you said. The study itself is not a major, should not be a major funding issue. The only thing I disagree on is I have little faith in the U.S. Congress to give us the 10 billion or so that I'm afraid it will cost, although that will be over 15 years, according to what the Corps has told us. So it doesn't sound like that much per year, but I agree with everything that you said about the need for speed here. Let me call on Mr. Murley, Secretary Murley. Jim, you've had so many titles over your career. I'm not exactly sure what to call you, but Mr. Murley, you're recognized, sir, for remarks. And also, on behalf of Dade County, can you speak on their view as to what Commissioner Furr just said?
Well, thank you, Chairman Geller and members of the commission. It's kind of like coming home to come to this meeting and have these discussions. My grandchildren call me old granddad, so I'm beginning to feel
That's suburban, I believe.
Yeah. So most importantly, I speak here as the Chief Resilience Officer for the county, who I work directly for Mayor Danielle Levine Cava. We are apprised of everything that's been going on, and I know members of my county commission are online, so there has been no decision by either the mayor or the county commission that I can officially translate. But I am charged with monitoring several Corps of Engineers projects where the county is the non-federal sponsor or our district is the non-federal sponsor. They're all taking place on the same landscape, on the same, from the beach across the bay to the canals to the Everglades. So one thing I would say is very important for the Regional Planning Council working with the non-federal sponsors, because I think probably Broward is non-federal sponsor for something, is we need to really stress to the Corps to integrate these projects. Because we can go from one meeting on one project where they're talking about level 3 and level 5 and all these issues, and then the next project team is a little bit in a different place. So while you have to deal with them on a specific project under the guidelines of authorities, what we push for is integration across the landscape. And that's especially important for our counties to look at that way as we move forward. On the specific project, as some of the information that's been shared with you, we have been fortunate for 3 of the 23 canals to have received FEMA funding, which will allow some upgrades. They're not replacements, but upgrades, because each one of those canals received a $50 million grant, which to me sounded like a lot of money, but a total replacement is more like 200 million. So while we will have improvements, which are important, we'll still have more to do. And we have a number of canals that have been talked about. We do have pumps on of these type, I believe, Carolina, on C6, which is the Miami River by the airport, and the Tamiami, which is coming in, which were put in a decade or more ago because of heavy rainfall, not a hurricane, but the famous no-name storm that flooded us. So we have some experience with the pumps, but we've also seen the data that, we have the same concerns downstream, Mr. Chair, and we're looking at all those issues. I again, not being able to speak directly on behalf of the mayor or the commission, I think these are the issues that need to be looked at regionally, integrating the projects as much as we can with the Corps and the Water Management District, and then being prepared to take those actions that the elected officials, in our case, a separate mayor, decide are appropriate. It is consistent with the work we're doing with the other core projects, but it has to be, you know, sort of teased out. And thank goodness we have Dr. Gerardo with us, to speak on behalf with her technical skills. I think she described it perfectly. I'm not gonna go back over that. But it does, each county will have to look at this in the budget process, as you said, Commissioner Furr, and make those decisions. I welcome the Regional Planning Council's initiative at this point. I think it frames it correctly. It's two counties that need to look at this together with our Regional Water Management District, and wherever we can speak on the same page. Respectfully, there may be some differences, but you know, wherever we can, look at this regionally. Thank you. Nice to be able to speak with the council.
Thank you. And Jim, it's always a pleasure to see you. We've known each other for many decades. Too many for me to want to discuss, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Dr. Moran, quick question, same one that I asked Dr. Gerardo. I'm a lawyer, I'm not an engineer. I just don't understand how putting in the salinity control barriers plus the giant pumps without building up berms or seawalls accomplishes the draining that we need after rainfall without massive flooding over the banks of the canals. Can you help on that?
Sure. I'll do my best here, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for the accurate summary of the status of this study. You have been an advocate for this, and you can explain better than all of this in this room where we are, and it was great to have this brief update. Thank you also, Senator Geller and Commissioner for all the Planning Council members for helping us on really recognizing the urgency of this study. This is not the most attractive, easy to communicate type of investment, and having the support from all of you to communicate and talk about it is essential, especially now where we are. So really, we need buyers. We need buyers for this type of investment. The timing is critical, and we appreciate the coordination to the Planning Council and helping us to communicate those questions. Also, we received very happy, very enthusiastic on the proposal for helping us accelerate the funding, accelerate the study itself. That's aligned to what South Florida Water Management District has been seeking. As Senator Geller presented, Jennifer also alluded to, we have been working on assessing those structures for 10 years now. We have a well-established program looking at vulnerabilities, where we are, and the needs that we have for the system. We have a plan that we put together with a series of investments, and we have the consolidated report that is now a requirement. Jennifer also has this slide on her presentation. So we are very concerned where we are with the study now. We are very concerned with the lack of a waiver still in the early spring, perhaps pens down scenario. This is definitely what we are trying to avoid, and working very closely with the core team to be able to continue this study, given already the delays in water target, and we don't want any further delay, especially where we are now, and also giving the new requirements for the design that has already a potential impact on the water. So we have been talking with the Corps. We expressed our concerns. The district received the three proposals as well. We look at the timing. That was definitely our major concern. We have been discussing with them on the strategies on how we can do this. And what we proposed at that time, and what we have been discussing with the Corps as the local sponsor for this program, is really to leverage any available existing resource that we have in the region. Studies, analysis, technical studies, abilities to advance design, our ability as an agency, and really working with the counties that are also doing similar studies, assessments, and can help with that. So this proposal is well received. This is exactly what we are trying to work with the county, finding mechanisms that we can accelerate, expedite this study and the design. So on answering your question, I mentioned also the plan and the studies that we have. So none of the work that we have been advancing will cause any accessibility flooding anywhere else. We are preempted. We cannot do that from FEMA. We cannot fix one flooding issue by exacerbating flooding conditions anywhere else in the system. This is the minimal requirement for funding. design and additional modeling efforts will show all the strategies that we need to adhere to be able to implement those. The flexibility that the pump gives us allow us to operate the system more efficiently, doesn't allow us to make decisions like at the time that we need to make. Today, we make decisions 5-6 days earlier because of the lack of capacity that we have in the system. So it gives tremendous flexibility. Does not necessarily mean flooding, increasing discharge downstream. We are recovering discharge that were lost, flexibility, capacity to operate the system, and working very closely with the city. So to answer the question, no, there is no exacerbated flooding. There will be some components that will be discussed in coordination with local governments in the secondary system. We have been initiating some of those discussions when we are implementing some of those projects at the district level. Design to get to the 20% design, one checkbox that we need to make is also that one. We did a brief workshop with the Corps, and it was clear to us that this box of looking at the operation of the system downstream is also part of the design. So the 20% design will be addressing this, it's included. So yes, we're going to be working on that, identifying additional potential elements in some of the projects that we have been looking at the district, already looked at some of additional components. So S27, 28, 29 are already evolving to a basing strategy, looking at the canal enhancements that we need as a whole. We will continue on this path. I understand the study that we have authorized today, even on the 11.3 scope, will also allow us to look at canal. So at this point, we are not restricted and we will be able to enhance these structures and the canals upstream, downstream as needed as part of this current effort that we're discussing here today. I'm not sure. Or what's to add into that?
What, I think
It's council member first, Senator.
yeah,
Councilmember Furr, and then I'm hoping to wrap up the meeting in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Councilmember Furr, you're recognized, sir.
I think what I'm trying to understand, Dr. Marina, is if the counties might be willing to go in on helping pay for the study. Do you think the South Florida Water Management District might be able to match funds to do that?
Well, I'm not positioned.
And I know you're not,
to
I
do
know
that
you can't,
now
I know you
here.
can't answer.
We have been discussing multiple funding strategies
So-
for this and the other projects.
So to get to
That's a
that,
firm maybe.
okay.
Same
So,
thing we
so-
got from Dade County, a firm maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe if we go step by step and then this regional planning council says this is an alternative way to go about doing this, and we vote for that.
Mhm.
We say, let's go forward, encourage both counties to seek alternative monies to pay for a study, looking to both county and South Florida Water Management District as potential sources. That's what I would like to see happen. And then we can present a proposal to South Florida Water Management District. Miami-Dade would have to look at this independently. We would have to look at this independently for Broward. But I think combined, if you have the regional planning council saying, we're encouraging this.
Right, and that's what the agenda item said.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right,
so
Councilmember Furr, prior to our leaving this topic, I will ask for a motion on
Okay.
what you just said, basically. Let me ask Major Bell, if he has any comments, I want to hear from him. And if Tim Geisen has any additional comments, because we have not heard from either of them yet. So Major Bell or Mr. Geisen, do either of you have any additional commentary? Major Bell, are you there? Major Bell, if you're there, are you still on mute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we
Yes,
can.
sir. Yes, Major.
So I appreciate everyone's time this morning to allow us to be a part of this. So we're looking for any support we can get, and getting this study to the finish line. And that can be from different sources. Our state non-sponsor, federal sponsor is of South Florida Water Management District. So anything that you can do to support them will support us to be able to come to a resolution on this. Tim Dyson can speak into more details on the system and how the impacts from an engineering standpoint, hydraulic standpoint can get after your concerns with flooding. But we do not see issues just like South Florida Water Management District has discussed with flooding by increasing the pumps systems overall. Over.
So, Major Bell, are you saying that if the studies would, as I believe Dr. Moran said, that the studies would include not only the cost of the salinity control structures, but also the downstream or the seaward banks of the canals, if necessary, to prevent flooding? Is that accurate?
I defer that to Tim Dyson, our PM. He can talk the details for you. Over.
Thank you, Major.
Yeah,
Mr. Geisen, can you answer that last question?
sure, absolutely. And I think Dr. Moran touched on it. Part of the solution will be looking at risk that could be transferred downstream to make sure that we're not causing additional flooding. So it would be a more comprehensive type solution where we would look at not only capacity of the canal and structure upstream needed to pass that water, but risk to the downstream areas as well. And if there are additional features that are needed to make sure that the system would work properly, those would be part of that solution.
Excellent. Did you have
Hopefully
any
that answers
additional?
that question.
Thank you, Mr. Geisen. Did you have any additional comments you wish to make?
Sure, I would like to make one additional comment. I think you had heard me speak last year at one of your meetings, talking about the community resilience and how it takes partners at all different levels of government to build that. And I think this is a great example of how that partnership can really work. We're in a pretty sticky situation, and having support at all levels of government to each help tackle the solution, this is how we can work forward and be successful in the long run. So I appreciate all of the discussion today.
Thank you, Mr. Geisen. I appreciate that. Were there any other comments from any of the other SFRPC members before I ask for a motion?
Can I ask just one question?
Councilmember.
Is that Councilmember Kaufman?
Yes.
I probably missed the purpose of this study. What is the purpose of this study?
Shall I?
Yes, please, of course.
So Jennifer Gerardo, so the Central Southern Florida Control Project is this elaborate network of the canals and those control gates. And as a function of sea level rise, the gates that typically open to release the floodwaters either can't open because the water on the downstream side is too high, or because we've lost the gradient between upstream and downstream, it doesn't drain as fast. So the purpose of this study is to do a reassessment of the system today, the landscape today, the environmental conditions today, and moving forward to meet the flood protection needs through the improvements of this system, accounting for the 2070-2100 timeframe.
Don't they require an update of the 48 study? No?
Yeah, principally it is. It's an update of what that
Study
original
48,
work was.
this they have to update.
Things have
Right.
changed.
If we're going to need the Army Corps or US Congress to spend perhaps $10 billion in improvements to the salinity control structures and presumably the smaller canals and the banks, there needs to be the engineering study first to show what's necessary and how much it will cost. And that's the study we're discussing. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I will ask either, since I don't have it in front of me, either Isabel or Sam to review the action item that is on the agenda, and then I think it may need to be amended. Can you please read what today's action item is?
Yes, Chair. So agenda item 4H just basically gave a little summary of what you just heard. And the last paragraph by staff says, following the conclusion of the presentation and conversation, the SFRPC board may wish to convey its recommendations to Broward and Miami-Dade counties, including a possible recommendation urging the counties to use local funding to expedite level 3 engineering studies in partnership with the South Florida Water Management District to position the salinity control structures or the flow zone ones for federal funding on an expedited basis. The recommendation was provide council staff with guidance as to next steps.
Okay, I believe based on what we've heard and what Commissioner Furr has said, that
Mhm.
what we should be doing is passing similar to what you had originally written, that the SFRPC pass a resolution urging Dade and Broward, I don't think it affects Monroe, urging Dade and Broward counties to work in partnership with the South Florida Water Management District to fund the preliminary studies so that we can get hopefully on the 2028 program that we will need to get to for the WERDA 2028 that we're urging the counties and South Florida Water Management District to work together to get that study funded immediately. Commissioner Furr, was there anything you think needed to be added to that?
No, I think you captured it.
Okay,
I'll make the motion.
I was just going to comment that that motion is coming from Commissioner Furr. I heard a second. Who is that? Is that Commissioner Perland?
Orland second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any debate? Is there any debate? Seeing no debate, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Shows that adopted unanimously. Isabel, please prepare a letter for my signature,
Yes.
showing what that was adopted unanimously. And
Here's the timer. See, we'll make sure to do this very quickly, okay?
please, thank you. And
Really?
I'd like, on behalf of the SFRPC, I'd like to thank both Dr. Jurado, actually no, I'd like to thank Dr. Jurado, the Army Corps, and the South Florida Water Management District, and Miami-Dade Office of Resilience for all attending today's meeting.